Hello and welcome back to Redirecting. Another very interesting article was shared that just kind of caught my attention, and it's not surprising at all what I'm looking at, but it's still disturbing nonetheless. But it goes back to what we continue to talk about on this channel, that we would like to see Africa have control of Africa before we promote returning to Africa. And again, many don't like to hear us say that. They think that we should blindly go there and just see what happens. But when I see articles such as this and other things that are coming forth out of the continent of foreigners literally taking over, it really, really bothers me. Anyway, this article says that the Chinese plans to put 300 million Chinese in Africa and take over the continent. Now, I'm going to go ahead and insert the word allegedly, because sometimes numbers can be thrown out there and you have no idea what is actual in these cases, because there was another article that had a few less. It was still in the millions, but it wasn't 300 million. So allegedly, the Chinese plan on putting 300 million Chinese in Africa. Of course, they added the part to take over the continent, because undoubtedly, if you put 300 million of anything somewhere, that is a takeover, right? Of course, the Chinese aren't going to say that the plan is to take over. But if you have 300 million of your people going to the continent, that would be almost essentially a takeover, especially since you all will be the ones, or should I say they will be the ones who are installing the infrastructure in Africa and doing so many other things. But anyway, there was an interview of Doug Casey, and this is one of the statements that he made. Allegedly made. Whether it's the number 300 million is the accurate number, or whether it's 5 million or 1 million, it is still very disturbing to see a huge chunk of Chinese people going into the continent, seeing that they already have such a strong presence, and there are already a ton of them there. Okay. But anyway, Doug Casey says, I've said for years that China is in the process of taking over Africa. In fact, that was a sub-theme in my first novel, Speculator, about the gold mining industry and bush war in Africa. Some years ago, a Chinese high government official said that their plan was to move 300 million people from China to Africa. That's an incredible number of people. The Chinese think big, but it wasn't really picked up anywhere in the press. Over the years, every time I go back to Africa, I see more Chinese. And when they're working, I need to increase the size of the font on my screen before I continue on, family. So bear with me one moment. It's kind of small reading for my eyes. Okay. There we go. That is much better. Okay, he says, over the years, every time I go back to Africa, I see more Chinese, and when they're working on an industrial or mining project, they're all dressed in the same color jumpsuits, almost like the Chinese in Goldfinger, if you remember. From a long-term point of view, China is taking over Africa. It's a very intelligent plan and an unspoken part of their One Belt, One Road program. They loan money to some backward African government to build a port, railroad, an airport, or what have you. The Africans can almost never pay back those loans, so the Chinese are part of the deal. Take over the facility and staff it with their own people. This is actually going on today. If the African leaders don't like it, unlikely since they've pocketed millions under the table for facilitating the deal, they will likely find their lives are in danger. If that doesn't work, the country may have to visit or may have a visit from the Red Army. I suspect that this facial recognition thing in Zimbabwe is just part of a much bigger plan that relates to the social credit system that is instituted in China now. Interesting. This may indeed be the plan, but a lot can go wrong when attempting to take over an entire continent. And I hope something goes terribly wrong for the plan, RW. Now, one thing I want to say about this guy, Doug Casey, in no way should we consider this a person who cares about the people of Africa. I think the biggest concern is that someone else or another foreign national or foreign nation is moving in on the West and their stronghold that they already have on the continent. So it is not that he's putting forth this information because he's concerned about the people. He's just more concerned about the fact that their investment is kicking up and possibly knocking out the West. Okay, because it's not just Chinese that are infiltrating Africa. It's also people of India. So the East is gaining ground and the West is feeling like, ah, man, we let them get too much of a stronghold here. Now, all of this says to me, again, that African leadership is in no position to really take care of the people on the ground. So they make these deals with these foreign nations. The people are left out of these deals. And one thing I do agree with the guy who had this interview in this article that I read, I do agree that initially they may present it as, okay, here are jobs for the African people. But once they are established there, they eventually phase the Africans out of those jobs and bring their own people in to fulfill those jobs. And so what you essentially have is a takeover. These people are doing what they want on the continent, keeping the Africans out. So what the heck's going on then? But yet we have a lot of Africans telling those of us here in the diaspora to come to Africa. So what are we coming to? Who's going to be running the show? What I need to know, make me understand why and how we are going to be any different over there than the position that you all find yourself in. Because if these Chinese companies aren't hiring Africans or hiring very few Africans, what makes you think that they're going to hire us? Now, what I'm finding more interesting than anything is it seems like the people of Africa only want the best of the best from the diaspora. They don't want the average person or the average so-called black person over there. They're not interested in families that would come over there who want to escape the rulership of the people that they're under, but to live among black people. If you're a person with no money, I doubt very seriously if they want us all to relocate there. Okay. Now, I get it. I'm not ignorant of the fact that it takes money to get yourself out of situations, but I also don't like the fact of feeling like they only want to use the best of the best, but they have no real concern or care about those who are in need in the diaspora. Because just like there are those who are in need in Africa, you have those who are in need here in the diaspora as well, whether they're in the U.S., down in the Caribbean, or in Canada, wherever we may be. There are poor black people all over the planet. But I get a sense, and I need somebody to help me to understand why I am feeling like we're not really wanted there if we don't have money. But we are wanted there so that we can kind of help them like a big brother to get out of the financial woes that they are in. I can't help but feel that. So I need somebody on the continent to realistically help me understand your point of view, because I get some from Africa who really, truly are honest, and they give us a real report of what's going on the ground. And they tell you to think twice before showing up over here thinking that you're going to just change things. I don't think there's, I don't think there's a chance that blacks in the diaspora are going to go in there and be a stronghold over the Western powers that are there and now the Chinese powers. You might have a few millionaire celebrities and then a few people who have enough money to go over there and settle down and buy a house and buy land and set up a business perhaps and do well in Africa, but they are not necessarily in a financial position to do better or more than the Chinese. I mean, even those Roberts brothers, I heard one YouTuber were talking about those two billionaire brothers who are no longer billionaires, the two black billionaires out of St. Louis that many of us were harping on years ago. Apparently, they've hit bankruptcy and they no longer have all of this money that they were talking about, but they've carved themselves a little niche in Africa too. So even they, being one of only a few black billionaires, even they are not even in a position to go and do what the Chinese are doing on the continent. I mean, look at Oprah, for instance. Oprah was able to go there and build a school in South Africa, but I don't hear any news further than that of Oprah building airports and bridges and putting in roads and establishing infrastructure. So you see the difference? I feel like the people, some of the people, not all, but I feel like there are groups of people on the continent who are reaching out to the celebrities in the deep pockets in the diaspora, wanting them to come over there almost like as a cushion, come over here and establish citizenship and build your life over here, almost like a cushion against these foreign nations. But there's not enough money among the celebrities to do what the Chinese are doing or to do what the Western nations are doing. Take a look at the fact that the Western nations, these people are building military bases. I don't know any black celebrity, even if you combine their monies, if you take several black celebrities that have millions and billions of dollars, I don't know any group of them that could come together and build a military base. You see, now I know you can't just go somewhere and build a military base, but the point I'm trying to make is that these other nations, they are going in, buying huge chunks of land and establishing things that are far different than somebody coming over there, buying some land and farming and setting up a business or opening up a shop. These people are putting in airports. They're putting in major corporations. They're mining, digging, building, infrastructure. We are not going over there to do that. But there was a call. They're saying, look, we want a Wakanda village because they're appealing to our ignorance, right? So they want to stroke your ego and say, Wakanda village, Wakanda village. Hey, best of the best. And so a lot of people falling for it want to send their money over there. A village is nothing more than a piece of land where people are going to say, okay, we're going to open some stores, build some houses, and just have a few things here, maybe a school and maybe this or that or that or this. In which, guess what? There is nothing wrong with that. But you see how small that is in comparison to someone putting in an airport or building roads or mining and all of this other stuff that these other nations are doing. And guess what? Here's another thing. These other nations are binding the Africans to contracts. They're saying, look, we will lend you billions of dollars. And there's a long paper trail that's going to guarantee that they're going to get their money back. If they don't get their money back, guess who owns that country? If you answer Chinese, boom, you got it correct. But here's the deal, though. On the flip side of that, any black American or black person from the Caribbean or from the UK or from Canadian, a black Canadian, any of us who invest money in Africa in any type of way like that, we won't have that same stronghold. We won't be able to say, well, if you don't pay back the money that we have given, then we now own this, that, or the other. We are being asked to just send money over there. And if it works out, fine. If it don't, arrivederci. Do you all see the difference? The Chinese and all these other nations, they're like, okay, if you don't pay up, this is what's going to happen. But it's expected of us as so-called black people that if we send money or invest in Africa, now I want y'all to prove me wrong. Would we have the same type of protections in place as the Chinese? Would we be able to say, okay, since you all haven't been able to pay the money back that we've invested in said thing, that we now have ownership of said thing? Would we be able to say that? It would be expected of us to chalk it up as a loss. And y'all know I'm right. It would be expected of us to chalk it up as a loss. So, again, we have this guy here, Doug Casey. Allegedly, he's saying in an interview that allegedly China is planning on moving 300 million Chinese people from China to Africa. That's not a friendly visit, family. That is a takeover. Now, for once, I would like to see that our people are not angry at us for pointing out the obvious. Sometimes when I get these comments, I say to myself that people are not fair. They expect us to shut up about these things and not warn our people who are in the diaspora. Of course, I know there will be those who are going to go over there and live. That is fine. That's different. If you're just going over there with the expectations of just living there, you just want to be a citizen, that's fine. But don't try to lure people with false pretenses talking about you're bridging some type of gap when really the pool and the goal is to get into the pockets of those in the diaspora who you consider to be the best of the best. What do you think everybody else is? The worst of the worst? And I'm not foolish enough to think that the people of Africa want alcoholics and drug addicts to just come flooding the continent. Of course not. I get that. But what about someone who is just middle class and is only able to just take care of meager needs? When you say the best of the best, I can assure you that is not who they are looking for. They're not looking for a person who can only just survive. They're looking for deep pocket blacks that are going to come over there and boost the economy with no guarantees whatsoever, like the same guarantees that are put in place for these foreign governments. Is it fair what I've said here? Is it fair? I think we all need to think a lot more clearly and stop thinking with our feelings and emotions. Of course, we are all tired and frustrated of the persecution. But why go from one persecution to another? One set of bad circumstances to another? Because you're not going to just magically leave where you are, and then as soon as your feet land on the continent, your life is just going to be smooth sailing and better just because you're on a continent that is inhabited by so-called black people. To me, that is a false dream to think that you're just going to bounce from here to over there and all of a sudden everything's going to fall in place. That's unrealistic thinking. Well, anyway, I just wanted to share this article with you all. And, you know, it's really sad to me to kind of see these other nations literally fighting over Africa. I mean, the one person who put this article in, they said that they hope that the Chinese don't succeed. I'm going to read that part again. It says, this might be indeed the plan, but a lot can go wrong when attempting to take over an entire continent. And I hope something goes terribly wrong for the plan. Now, for this person to say that, when they say terribly wrong, I can assure you that terribly wrong, they want something to happen that's going to affect the people of Africa. They don't care about the people. They only care about their interest on the continent. That's what they care about. I'm not hearing much talk at all about the people of Africa in this interview, but more so about the takeover of Africa, because there is a lot to be taken from Africa. The same thing they've been doing for centuries. The beat goes on. They continue to do that. And so-called black people are none the wiser. Like they said, once these African leaders get these kickbacks, as you might want to call them, they've given them millions to allow these things to go smoothly. They sign off on things. The Chinese or the Western nations give these leaders millions of dollars. And they sign on the dotted line, signing away the continent right? And that's why the former African ambassador to the AU African ambassador, when she said we should stop looking at the money that the leaders are getting, she said, stop looking at that. Don't pay attention to that. But look at the billions that these foreign nations are getting. In other words, she was telling us to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the corruption of the African leaders. If you really take a look at that statement and you pick it apart and you use righteous judgment and you analyze what she said, she's basically saying, don't look at the rottenness of the leaders of Africa. Forget about that. That's only small potatoes, rottenness and wickedness compared to these other nations. Pay that no mind. Just come on over here, invest your money. Forget about the crooked leaders. Now, if these leaders are willing to sell out their own population of people, what makes you think that they are not willing to sell out the diaspora who they're appealing to invest all of this money in Africa? Like I said, individuals and small groups, if you want to start a business in Africa, that's a far cry different than what these other nations are doing. They're not just starting a little small business, opening up a store or a little mom and pop operation or some little corporation. These people are doing something big. And as you see, not even the Oprahs and the other black billionaires of the world have been able to do anything like that. Oprah's school in South Africa pales in comparison to the investments that these other nations have put on the continent. Okay, that is it for now. That is it for now. I'm just saying my piece, in which I have that right. So all of you who live on the continent who get offended when we say our piece, I have to look out for my people. Okay, you want to look out for yours. I want to look out for mine. Now, I know a lot of my people are over there. Okay, and I'm talking about those who were born there, who've never left the continent. I consider those to be my people too. And this is why I say the things that I do, because I don't like how our people over there are being used and abused. And then you have those who want to try to pretend like all is well over there, like I don't know what I'm talking about, like my eyes are lying to me. It is very clear what is happening on the continent. And you can deceive whoever you think you can deceive, but you're not deceiving everybody. Okay, there is much work to be done on the continent before we need to pick up and sail ourselves across the water or fly across the sky and take up residence there. Besides, those of us who believe in the Most High Yah, we actually believe what the Bible says when it says that we should wait on Yah. And that we should not just move and jump from the frying pan into the fire. You have people who want to fly about on a hope and a prayer. Now, again, I'm talking about the masses. Right now, Africa cannot afford a mass exodus from black people who are just scraping by where they live. Of course, they're not going to say anything about Chinese people who come up there and take up residence, because the Chinese are going to take care of their own, right? But once you get an influx of millions of black people with no money, no way of taking care of themselves, I doubt very seriously if African leaders want a whole shipment of black people from all over the world who don't have a dime in their pocket. I doubt very seriously if they want us to come sailing over there to try to take up residence. Prove me wrong on that one. With that, I will say shalom. Be sure to ring the bell to be notified of new uploads on this channel, and also comment, share, like, and subscribe.